Before we get started, I'm not a religious person. My parents were Roman Catholics, so I grew up going to church on Sundays. I always hated going to church. The long-winded sermons by a 900-year-old man on a topic that I felt was boring didn't really grab me at a young age. It also didn't help that I was forced to go to Sunday school at 9 a.m. when I wanted to be watching cartoons and eating my Captain Crunch. This doesn't mean that I think religion is stupid or anything like that. Everyone has a right to their own beliefs, but I leaned more towards the world of science than religion. That's where this background comes into play. And sorry for the length, but a lot happened. I've been dating my now fiancée Grace for a few years. I proposed about 2 months ago, and we've been talking about our upcoming marriage and how she wanted to get married in the church she grew up in, but they required me to be part of their congregation or something like that. I love her, so I told her I would give the church thing a shot again. We went on Sunday and things were weird. When we parked outside, my fiancée was incredibly happy to be there. I knew she liked church, but this was like she just won a raffle. She was waving at other members of the community as we got out of the car and kept pointing to me and smiling to the other people. It was slightly weird, but maybe she was just happy for me to be there, interested in something that she was. There was about 10 minutes before the sermon began, so she said she wanted me to go meet the priest. "Come on, babe," she said to me with puppy dog eyes. I begrudgingly agreed. The outside of this place looked wrong. It wasn't like a normal church you would see in movies. It was more gothic in style. There was a lot of black stone used in the construction, and there were these weird stained glass windows that I could not make out what the picture was. As we walked further up the stairs that led to the entrance of the church, there was a weird vibe in the air. The people chatting on the landing of the stairs above Grace and I all seemingly stopped at once and turned to look at us as we moved closer up. "These people seem nice," I said jokingly to her as we continued up the final steps onto the landing. "They're just excited that I'm finally bringing you around," she replied warmly. When we got into the landing, there was about 10 people all standing and waiting for us to reach the top. Grace grabbed my hand and walked straight past all of the staring people with their seemingly dull eyes and dead smiles. When we entered the church, something felt wrong. The air in the building was heavy, like a thunderstorm was brewing inside the place of worship. I started to slow down as we entered the main part of the church. There were rows of pure black pews all facing an altar that stood in the center of a stage-like area. Now that I was inside, I could see what the stained glass windows depicted. There were ones on either side of the church walls. Both of the windows flooded the room with a red light, coming from the red decorations of the stained glass. Now, I was weary of this place from the beginning, but this is where I started to get freaked out. The window on the left depicted a man begging on his knees while another robed man stood above him. The begging man had a bowl in his hands and the robed man held out an outstretched arm. There was a cut on his arm that was draining into the bowl. On the other side there was a similar depiction, but instead of blood draining into a bowl, it was a rib from the robed man put onto the begging man's plate. Both of the begging men looked serenely content with their situations. I turned to Grace with a look of confusion. "Hey," I said softly, "what's with these paintings?" "Oh, I forgot," she shrugged. "They're a depiction of the body and blood of our Lord." I remembered something about wine and a cracker from my younger days being the body and blood of Christ, but this felt different. Those were symbolic in the stories I was told, not this literal. "That's quite a literal interpretation," I said, still looking at the pictures. Grace just looked at me and smiled. We were at the front of the pews now. There was a sickly older man sitting behind the altar. He wore a deep red robe with white ribbons around his neck. As he saw us, he started to get up from his chair. It creaked as he struggled to stand up. "Ah, Grace," he muttered as he shuffled around the altar. "You finally brought your fiancé." "Yeah," she said, turning to me. "This is Father Damon." I reached out my hand. "Nice to meet you, Father." He grabbed my hand in both of his wrinkled fingers gripping my hand tightly. "I hope you love it here as much as Grace does." He flashed her a quick, toothy grin. "I would love to see you two get married in this church." "We will see, Father," I said as I pulled my hand away. As I did, I saw something wrong about Father Damon's hands. There were dark red marks across both of his arms leading to his fingers. I couldn't make out what they were, but they looked like dark veins in the shape of something leading into his robes. He smiled with a porcelain grin as he turned away to go prepare for the sermon. "Father Damon is always so nice," Grace said, grabbing my hands. "I really hope you like it here. It would mean so much to be married in the place I grew up in." She squeezed my hand softly. "I love you." "I love you too," I replied. "I'm trying to get into it, just something feels off. Maybe it's being back in a church after all these years, but I have a pit in my stomach." "It's fine, come on." She guided me back to one of the rows of pews in the middle of the church. Soon the congregation from outside began to shuffle in. Once everyone was seated, Father Damon started his sermon. It was pretty normal for the first part, but there were still things that caught me off guard. Some of the call and responses made me uneasy. "To you I give my flesh so that you can be one with me," said Father Damon, pouring a blood-red liquid into a bowl. "We accept your gracious gift, O Lord," the congregation replied. Now, I knew my fiancée had a different religion than the ones that my parents followed, but when she explained it, I thought it was a different sect, like being a Protestant instead of a Roman Catholic, or something along those lines. Maybe she was something completely different. Then it was time to receive communion. This is where all of the red flags from before combined. When it was our turn to get up to get in line, I protested. I figured since I wasn't part of the community, I couldn't get communion. Grace shook her head and pulled me up. While I shuffled out of the pews, all of the people around me were patting me in the back and congratulating me on becoming the newest son of the Lord. When we were almost at the front of the line, I watched what the other people were doing. Father Damon said something and then poured the red liquid into the followers' hands. They dipped their fingers into the wine and drew something on their forehead and then drank the remainder of the liquid. Then they received a deep red cookie from Damon and ate that while walking back to their spot. Then it was my turn. "Are you ready, my child?" Father Damon said, looking down at me. "Sure," I said nonchalantly. He dipped his fingers into the liquid this time instead of pouring it into my hands. "Lean forward, my child," Father Damon commanded. I hesitantly leaned forward. He leaned over, groaning slightly as he did, and began to draw something on my forehead. His fingers were rough against my head, and the liquid was warm. Far warmer than I would have expected. When he was finished, he dipped the bowl down to my lips. I turned to Grace. She nodded her head and smiled reassuringly. I accepted the dark liquid. What I thought was wine was far more viscous and warm than regular church wine. It was sickeningly sweet, but there was a metallic aftertaste to it. I felt immediately nauseous after swallowing. When I looked up, Father Damon was smiling, holding the ruby red cookie. He placed it in my hands, and without thinking I put it in my mouth to try and alleviate the taste of the drink. The cookie was not sweet or sour. It tasted like a rare steak in a weird way, but it did not have the texture of a steak at all. My head began swimming. I don't know if it was the blood drink that I'd swallowed or the meat cookie chaser, but I was not feeling good. In a flash, I felt weak and began to sweat like I had a fever. I fell to my knees, the world moving back and forth in front of me. I tried to look up at Grace, but everything felt wrong. The world felt heavy and my head was pounding. "It's all right, my son," a voice said. "Accept this and everything will be better than before." My head was screaming and the ritual paint on my forehead was burning. Grace bent down to me and grabbed my arm. "It was hard my first time too," she said in a quite soft voice. She picked me up and turned me toward the onlookers in the pews below. When I scanned the crowd, it looked like every single one of the drawings on their foreheads were glowing a deep ruby red. They were all in the shape of a crimson eye. I stumbled forward with Grace at my side, looking into the crowd. She pulled me back. "Everyone, welcome my fiancé, Nathan, to our community," she said to the smiling people. The lights on their foreheads seemed to grow brighter in a moment as they said, in unison, the final thing I heard before I blacked out. "Welcome, brother Nathan, to the Church of Malthus." When I woke up, I was back in my bed. Grace hasn't said a word about it since, other than that she's happy I'm part of her world now. Something is different with me. It's been 5 days since I've been to the church and I still feel the burning of the crimson eye on my forehead, even after several showers, and I've started to hear things that aren't there. The voices tell me terrible things that makes my head swim, and this headache is worse than anything I've had in my life. Grace won't tell me anything about what they fed me or what was happening to me. Even writing all of this down was incredibly hard, but I felt I had to get this out in case something happens to me. I have to find out what they did to me. I have to go back.